We're going to take a dive here into a couple of videos and everything that I became aware of a few years ago as I watched the Ukraine war unfold, as I watched another war unfold in Armenia and Azerbaijan for the region called Nagorno-Karabakh. And it was a very different war. This is going to be recognized where war changed. And I became aware of a gentleman, retired Colonel John Antal, and I'd watched one of his videos from the Fort Sill, Oklahoma Fires Conference. And this video is strictly about the Nagorno-Karabakh war, and we're not going to be covering that, but I'm going to be linking it into this video. And this is his presentation has evolved and continually evolves. That's kind of why we're going through it, and continually evolves regarding the future of warfare. Now, his point of view is obviously that of a United States soldier and taking care of his soldiers and how to fight the next future war, which is, as you can see from some of the previous videos on this channel, that I am very interested in, because I think the United States is far behind on where we should be and what we face in the future. Unfortunately, I think we're very far behind. We traditionally do start from behind. If you look back at the history of wars of the United States, we do traditionally start behind our enemies, because that's just how we are. But the colonel here is a voice in the wilderness. I think what he says is very important, relevant, and will be in the future seen as almost prophetic. So we're going to start with just a couple basic introductors about it, and we'll go from there.
This briefing's unclassified. Anyone could have put this together. I got it from open sources. I update this briefing daily. So if you've seen this before, you're going to see a different version here. And this is my 83rd briefing since January 2021. And I have briefed Chief of Staff of the Army. I briefed sergeants in Special Forces at Fort Bragg. I brief anyone who thinks they need this kind of information to help their team and help our Army.
As you can see, that is clearly what his point of view is. And that is from another video that we won't actually be covering today, but I will, of course, link it, because, again, he evolves. And that's why I'm going to actually link those, because chronologically, this is the latest one. So if you go from the first one that will be linked, will be the Nagorno-Karabakh specific war. The one that was just preceding, where we just heard a few seconds of the introduction and how often he's done the briefing up to that point. That is actually to the National Training Center and a group that is there. I highly recommend that video as well. The end of it is phenomenal. The question and answer might be one of the most enlightening question and answer periods you'll see as our Army really takes into account the things that he says here, and what he says is very important. So important, we're going to now start with his presentation called Next War. Are you ready? Insights by Colonel John Antal.
We should be good. Do you see the screen? Outstanding. All right. For all the participants here, I don't know if there are any ladies there, but ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you now about the next war. And this is primarily about getting you thinking about where we're headed, because right now the world looks like it's on fire. And first, no affiliation. I don't work for anyone right now. I'm retired, but I do this job. Right now that I am briefing folks across the U.S. government and the U.S. military in order to raise their awareness of the changing methods of war. I do this as a soldier for life. So I do this because I want to, and I want our leaders to be ready. I want our military and government leaders to understand what's coming. I don't charge for these presentations, and I do it because of my passion to get us ready and win the next conflict if we have to fight. Now, only open source information was used in this presentation, and everything that is in this presentation, you in fact could have got off of open source information, and I don't use any classified materials. This gives me the opportunity to talk to a wider audience and use like you and many others. Now, my purpose is to raise your awareness of the changing methods of warfare and inspire you to study, to adapt, and to act in time. Now, the methods of war are changing. Imagine if you showed this picture to anybody in the 19th century, they would freak out. In fact, anybody in 1990 would look at this and think it was an alien. But no, this is a Ukrainian FPV drone operator, and this is how they look when they're doing this. At least this is one way they can look. So what we have right now is a big change in warfare, and the technology is being adapted to do amazing things.
I have to mute it there because he does have some music. But what you see here is the highlights of FPV drone strikes. And FPV drones have absolutely changed the nature of warfare as we know it. $500 takes out multi-million-dollar systems on a routine basis. It's incredible.
Combat footage. Those are drones crashing into vehicles and destroying equipment and killing people. It's not a video game, it's real happening, and there it is. And if you look at that one video, if you remember that one that was just shown you of the BMP that is trying to drive away from the FPV drone, and the commander, the Russian commander that is trying to shoot the drone as it's coming in, the last act of defiance before he dies. Just imagine that situation.
That can, however, be fixed, and spoiler alert, we will get a lot more into this towards the end of this video. But you give that young man a shotgun, you give all those men shotguns, and they have a much better chance of hitting it than they do with a BB to a BB. When you can shoot a couple thousand BBs out there and have a much greater chance. Just my thought.
That it will attack Taiwan, that Taiwan is a part of China, and that anyone in their way will be pushed aside. Well, the United States, Britain, Australia, Japan, the Philippines, and many other countries are in China's way. So what will happen if China decides to launch, particularly if they decide to launch an attack sooner than we think, possibly even this year, because of so many other wars going on and tying the United States, the UK, and Australia down? The next is North Korea. I don't know if you've been following the news in North Korea, but the rhetoric is now reaching fever pitch. Kim Jong-un says he's going to reunify the peninsula, that in fact, he doesn't want war, but he can't wait to have one, and that they're shooting actual artillery shells near South Korean islands right at the shore. So we have some provocations going on. We have a lot of saber rattling. Kim Jong-un's done this before, but what if he really means it this time?
What if he does mean it this time? There's a lot of ifs. But now we also have reports of North Korean troops on Russian soil, possibly even engaged in combat operations against Ukrainian soldiers who are in the Kursk offensive. Not to mention all of the confirmed sightings of North Korean vehicles, North Korean ammunition. The North Koreans are very much involved in this in many ways. Whether they're going to be in active combat operations, well, the rumors are they already are. But if they are, we'll see.
We don't know. Only he knows. And then we have Iran. Iran right now is at war with the United States. We're fighting them in the Red Sea with their proxies, the Houthis. All of the missiles come from Iran.
Absolutely, all the missiles come from Iran. They absolutely do come from Iran. We've been able to prove that by seizing ships at sea, and multiple different intelligence sources confirm this. And these aren't dumb missiles, just idiot rockets shot by some of the terrorist groups. These are targeted, and these are accurate. This is video taken from an Israeli airbase during the Iranian attack. And as you can see, there are multiple impacts in the same areas. And damage report was assessed that these did hit targets. These did absolutely hit targets. So Iranian missiles aren't anything to scoff at. Iron Dome, being as effective as it is, can be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The Iranians know that, and that's what they did. It's a lot easier than people think to overwhelm a missile defense system. Sometimes it's just a BB shooting a BB. Phasers and lasers don't exist to the extent that people hope they can yet. They will soon, but as of this moment, they do not.
Houthi scientists did not create those ballistic missiles. The Iranians arm them, tell them what to do, and the Houthis, although they have some independence, nonetheless do what Iran tells them to do for a lot of reasons. So right now we're at a war with the United States and the UK and much of the West is at war with Iran, because what Iran has done through the Houthi rebels has changed the complexion of international shipping and made a tremendous impact on economies across the world by blocking the ships coming out of the Red Sea. And right now, major companies are taking the long route around shipping companies around Africa rather than go through the Red Sea, which is adding to their costs, adding to their time. All sorts of disruptions are occurring. And since the West, particularly the United States, cannot guarantee shipping through the Red Sea anymore, that weakens us and strengthens Iran. It also,
and as we've seen numerous times, the Houthis have managed to attack many ships, sinking multiple ships and capturing some and turning one into an amusement park. Just incredible. This is the video of a Houthi attack. As you can see, very devastating. You can see the smoke coming out of the funnel of the vessel. I'm not sure if this vessel sunk, but a number of them have. Just from the way it looks, I don't know if this one was recoverable. Whether it was or wasn't, what isn't recoverable is the situation unless we do something about it.
also strengthens Russia and China. So we have challenges going on. These four nations you need to know about. You need to know about their militaries. You need to know how they fight. You need to know their capabilities. Now, along with those four adversaries, there are four wars right now that you need to understand, and actually five when you count what's going on in the Red Sea. So the first, this is all since 2020. The first war that you need to understand is the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, which happened in 2020. From September to November 2020, 44 days, the Azerbaijanis attacked Armenian forces in the Nagorno-Karabakh region, launched a 44-day assault, which ended in decisive victory. How many decisive military victories do you know about in the last 30 years? This is a unique operation. It's worthy of study. It was a multi-domain operation. It was a joint operation. And more importantly, it was the first war in history to be won primarily by robotic systems. The first war in history to be won primarily by robotic systems. Now, robotic systems didn't win it alone. Azerbaijani special forces, tanks, artillery, and infantry were all needed to do this. And the Azerbaijanis put together a very good plan and executed it very brilliantly. But they were able to leverage the technology at the time of the Bayraktar TB2, the Harop loitering munition, the Orbiter, and other unmanned aerial systems to such a degree that the Armenians had been kicked off their tipping point and couldn't effectively fight back. The next war that you need.
I just have to say again how great that video is. And I will be linking it here. It was presented at the Fires Conference at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. His video regarding the Nagorno-Karabakh War is very in-depth, very concise. It goes into the weeds, takes a lot of lessons out of it, a lot of lessons for the future that you actually saw happen. The things he said would happen, did happen in the Ukraine war and in the Palestinian uprising. And he will go into that here momentarily, but I cannot I can't recommend any more highly his video about the Nagorno-Karabakh War. And I'll be linking that, his channel, everything in this.
You need to understand is the Israeli-Hamas war of 2021. Not the one that's going on right now, well, that's another one. But this one of 2021, because this was the first war in history where the Israelis were able to demonstrate what I call an emerging kill web. Now, almost all of us understand what a kill chain is. A kill chain is a series of actions that get effects on target, either kinetic effects or non-kinetic effects. What the Israelis were able to do was they were able to use their artificial intelligence and all their intelligence information from humans all the way up to satellites to create a situation where after 11 days of fighting, Hamas sued for peace. Now, Hamas, after this war, after the 2021 war, reevaluated their whole situation. And you know what they've done since then, and we'll talk about that in a second. The next war.
And what they did is they adapted. They adapted as people and nations and states and groups always do. The enemy does one thing, you counter and you do another. It's the back and forth of warfare. It's been going on for hundreds of thousands of years since humanity crawled up from the mud.
War that you need to understand is the ongoing Russia-Ukrainian war in 2022, which started in 2022 and is still ongoing. This war is already the most devastating war in Europe since World War II. You've been watching it on television, I'm sure, but every day something new is coming out. The use of drones, the use of robotic systems, the use of artificial intelligence, all of these things are impacting the war, plus trenches, bayonets, RPGs, down to the old ways. So this war goes across the spectrum of combat, and it gives us a scale and depth of war that we really need to understand. And if the Ukrainians lose, the implications for the West will be tremendous.
The dystopian nature of the Ukrainian war is absolutely incredible. You have state-of-the-art weapons flying in space, high altitude, low altitude, down into individual drones, hunting individual people. The dystopian nature of this war, it's in the mud, it's in space. It's with the bright blue colors. It's in the grime of the brown and blood and guts. It's one of the most dystopian things. I'll link a couple of videos in the description. One of a drone hunting a person down in one of my previous videos called "The War Has Changed." I'll link that video as well. And a trench fight that I cannot even show here, where the brutality of war is brought up close and personal. But the dystopian nature of the Ukraine war is the future of war, unfortunately. Missiles from hundreds and hundreds of miles away destroy hundreds and hundreds of people they never even saw coming. Well, just down the road, you have a hand-to-hand fight going on with shovels to the face. It is dystopian in a way that science fiction writers couldn't do justice.
And then the third is the ongoing Israeli-Hamas war. Now, what you saw there was the surprise of a first strike done in a completely unique way, how it knocked Israel off its tipping point, basically, pushed Israel back on its heels, and then Israel responded dramatically, getting 350,000, mobilizing 350,000 soldiers in a couple of weeks. How many countries could do that? Europe couldn't do that. I don't think the United States could do that. There are a lot of things going on in Israel that are worthy of your study. So these 4 wars are important. Number one.
How much has the war in the Middle East expanded? It now involves Lebanon, Syria, Iran, the groups in Iraq. It went from between 2 to between, I believe it's now 7 or 8 different nations have been attacked by Israel because of the actions of October 7th. It's incredible. This has expanded like gasoline expanding a fire.
The second Nagorno-Karabakh war, the first war primarily won by robotic systems. Number 2, the Israeli-Hamas war, the first war in history primarily won by artificial intelligence. Number 3, the ongoing Russia-Ukrainian war for a tremendous number of lessons that cross the spectrum of warfare. Number 4, the Israeli-Hamas war for an asymmetric approach for how you can do a first strike, and then also how you can fight in a densely urbanized battle space and yet still keep casualties, to a relative minimum on both sides. Now, you can argue that the Palestinian numbers that they're talking about are horrendous, but if this war had been fought by anyone else, if the Israelis weren't there, but it was the Russians, what would Gaza look like?
It would look exactly like it does today, a complete wasteland of devastation.
If it was the Chinese, what would Gaza look like? So this is an interesting war to study for many of those reasons. Now, from these wars, I developed what I call the 9 disruptors. These 9 disruptors are an important way of looking at combat today. Now, these disruptors give you insights as to how wars are fought. These disruptors may not be the same in 10 years, but right now they're very important. And the first is the transparent battle space. The point here is that against peer competitors, everything in the battle space can be seen, from satellites all the way down to ground sensors, everything in between, the stratosphere, aircraft, drones. The ISR, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance effort, is so great that the battle space is almost transparent. It is very, very difficult to hide. If they want to find you and they can put enough assets out, they will do so. Azerbaijan had its own satellites to look at the battle space. Azerbaijan, think about that. So more and more countries have access to satellite information, or can buy it, or have allies who will give it to them. And then you've got everything that goes from there, including spy balloons. That's not a joke. The stratosphere is a very important aspect of understanding how to control the ground. He who controls the stratosphere controls the ground. Now, nobody has a stratosphere force right now. The Chinese have balloons that do ISR and could do, in fact, maybe kinetic operations. We don't know for sure. The one that we shot down over the US didn't seem to have that. It was just ISR. But nonetheless, the stratosphere is important. The next.
The stratosphere is very important. Did you know Iran has spy satellite? North Korea has spy satellites. India, Pakistan have spy satellites. It's not just major powers that have this capability. It is now becoming a global thing. And besides their own, like he said in the presentation, you can have any number of different methods to get that information. And I want to highlight for you another method of information that he goes through in his video of the Nagorno-Karabakh war. He doesn't go as much in depth about this method of information gathering. But I want you to see this video, and what it shows is far more, and he explains it in the video. It shows far more than just an FPV drone attack.
We know that this area is well fortified. We know that even from this angle, from this perspective.
Sorry about that. Obviously, still have ads to contend with. This is the nature of things. We'll be returning to it here shortly. We just have to get back to it. Unfortunately, that is the nature of things. I may have trouble finding it. If that's the case, and it is, we're just going to move on. Back to our presentation.
Next is the first strike advantage. The first strike advantage is something that keeps me up at night and should keep all of you up at night as well. Here's the bottom line. If any of those countries that I showed you on that previous slide, any of the four, Russia, China, Iran, or North Korea, decide to do a first strike against US or allied forces in the world, we are easy targets, and they could kill a lot of us in the first strike. Now, whether the first strike would be decisive and win them the war, that's a question that no one can answer. In 1941, the Japanese thought a first strike against America and the United Kingdom forces in the Pacific and other allied forces would in fact win them the war, or at least cause shortly after that the United States to seek a peace. That wasn't the case, primarily because the Japanese first strike wasn't strong enough and powerful enough, although it was amazing. And if you and I had been alive in 1941 and had watched this happen, we would have been overawed that the Japanese could have done all that. What's interesting, I talked to a U.S. general officer not too many weeks ago, and I mentioned this to him. I said, well, you know, all of our facilities, including Hawaii, are in jeopardy against the Chinese. And he said, no way. Chinese could never reach Pearl Harbor. Yeah, that's what he said. The Japanese reached Pearl Harbor in 1941. But the Chinese today couldn't reach Pearl Harbor. So we have a tendency to put our heads in the sand and think that things can happen that could happen. The first strike advantage is something that if our enemies, the autocracies of the world, decide to do, they could slaughter a lot of allied forces in Europe. We are living in peacetime barracks. They know where we are. We are not in hardened positions. We are in peace. If they decide to strike us, they will be at war and we will be at peace and we will be at a disadvantage. If their strike is powerful enough, who knows what could happen? And you don't even have to use nuclear weapons. Now, the Russians did a first strike against the Ukrainians before they went in, but it wasn't strong enough. They attacked their Ukrainian cousins thinking they just slapped them around a little bit and the Ukrainians would fall in line. That didn't happen. China learned from that. So did North Korea. So did Iran. If you're going to do a first strike, you go all in. You make it awesome. You make it deadly. Here's our challenge. We are easy targets right now. Just think about it. The next.
And a first strike can take many forms. It doesn't necessarily have to be military. In this day and age, a first strike can take the form of sabotage. It can take the form of an internet hack. Something that takes down an entire power grid. How completely helpless is an entire nation without a power grid? How completely helpless is a nation without water or the ability to move food? There's any number of ways you can do a first strike. He's obviously referring to militarily, and I agree with his assessment. We are wide open for that. I think we're wide open for many other things too.
AI in the tempo of war. Artificial intelligence is accelerating everything. The tempo of war is accelerating, and sometimes at speed beyond human cognition. Iron Dome is an example of how a system is set up to fire autonomously in order to knock down missiles that human beings couldn't push buttons fast enough and triangulate fast enough and plan fast enough to be able to hit. More and more systems are like that because artificial intelligence is getting involved. And I'll talk more about that when we talk about the kill win. Top attack. The preferred method of attack is now top attack. Yes, you can still be blown up from the bottom. Yes, you can still be destroyed from the flank to the front. But top attack is the preferred method of war. You see this in Ukraine every day. You also see this in Gaza in some cases. So the situation is such that we have to be looking up. Soldiers and Marines today on the ground, sailors on ships and airmen in their air bases when they're not flying aircraft. They need to be looking up to see where the enemy's coming from, and we need to have systems to knock those down. One of the things I tell everyone also is that if we're going to protect ourselves against this, we need to mask against the enemy, and we'll talk about masking in a bit. But one of the ways that you have to train for that is you have to have unmanned aerial systems with cameras looking at you from above in your training. If in fact top attack is the preferred method of all the loitering munitions and all sorts of other systems, then what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that you can see what you look like from the top. And if you don't know if you're being easily seen or not. The next.
And top attack is most definitely the chosen method of attack. Top, side, FPV drones have absolutely changed the nature of warfare. Clearly not a top attack, but you can see the results of this $500 drone, this multi-million-dollar tank. It just cooks it off. Just cooks it off. And here, if it didn't literally go in the hatch and it didn't have the cope cage, which we've spoken about the cope cages prior, it would have come right through the top. And there's a reason everything now has a cope cage. Because as the colonel said, top attack is the chosen method of attack now. It has been for a while. And it's clear that a lot of our vehicles do have a huge vulnerability to that. They've shown it on multiple you can find any number of these videos about top attack online. Just go to Twitter and you will most definitely see it. And I want to go back to that video that I stumbled through here before with the ad. The FPV drone that you'll see in this is attacking a vehicle. But look what else it shows.
The black lines, what exactly is happening there. And today the Russians published the video, very interesting video, and in this video we can see the Russian drone that was flying exactly along the road between Shevchenko and Andreevka. And I would like to point your attention to this picture because the number of trenches, the number of fortifications is significant, huge, and it's very even difficult to describe the picture that we can see right now in front of our screens. Every single square meter was created by the Ukrainians into another defense belt, into another stronghold. So now it's even difficult to imagine what exactly is waiting for the Russians in this direction. Obviously, the battle for this stronghold is going to be very difficult.
And that's the other advantage that you get from these FPV drones, these small drone vehicles, is a situational awareness in live time, a situational awareness of the battlefield that you could never have before. And he does point all this out in the Nagorno-Karabakh video, which will, of course, be linked to this. But I wanted to get that video in there because it shows just a lone attack on a vehicle, but it shows you so much more. And it shows you the benefit of this kind of weapon system and its use on the modern battlefield. And again, how war has changed.
Next is fully autonomous. More and more weapon systems are moving to full autonomy. That is because of several reasons. Because first of all, artificial intelligence can enable them to do so. And secondly, fully autonomous systems, once you turn them on and set them to fight, can operate at speeds faster than human cognition. So therefore, they can be very effective. And once you turn them on, like a phalanx system on a ship, where a CIWS, where they actually shoot down with cannons, incoming rockets. Humans can't do that. So that fully autonomous system is really important. The Patriot system has a fully autonomous mode. More and more systems will be fully autonomous. Imagine when drones are fully autonomous, you turn them on, you send them out, they hunt and kill, and they need no human direction, and they are very difficult to jam because they don't need any direction from anybody else. The next is the super swarm. Now, swarming is a tactic. Some of you may know about General Custer and the Little Bighorn. Well, Custer was swarmed at the Little Bighorn. Don't be Custer. So swarming is a tactic. It's when you attack an enemy from multiple areas, multiple sides, from all directions, as fast as you can with as much as you can and overwhelm them. But a super swarm is different. Imagine a swarm, large number, 1,000, maybe more, of drones of all types. Drones that are maybe small, some are medium, some even high, all in a swarm, in a big cloud that extends out over a geographic area, all controlled by one human being that turns it on and tells it to go from A to B to C to D. And then as that swarm moves in that direction, according to the targeting parameters that has been issued in each individual weapon system and in the AI that's controlling it overall, each one of those things underneath it are destroyed. And as that happens, you just clear the area of everything that can be seen. Now, that doesn't mean war is over, that human beings will never be involved, and there aren't systems and ways to stop this. But the super swarm is what the Chinese are working on, and so is the United States.
It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Instead of hitting you with a $50 million missile, we're going to hit you with 50 $500 drones. A lot cheaper, a lot harder to defeat, and quite scary.
And you're going to see this someday. We've never seen a super swarm yet. We've seen swarms or packets of small UAS working together. In fact, the Ukrainians say that the best method is to use 4 drones to attack a target. That way you're sure to overwhelm it no matter how well it's protected. Just 4. So imagine 100 or 1,000. And you're talking an area if you want to break through. So if you wanted to break through on the Ukrainian front, a couple of super swarms would be an amazing thing. Because as you move through this, you'd also kill everything that you went through, including their artillery, their command and control, their logistics as you kept going. The kill web. So what is a kill web? I mentioned earlier the kill chain. You know, a kill chain is a series of steps, usually with humans in the loop that say, fire, fire, fire. Yes, we've identified the target. Authorize, go. Fire, yes, shoot. And then the round and effects go down. It could be cyber, it could be rockets, missiles, bombs, whatever. The kill chain takes the kill web takes the humans out of that by putting the human only in charge of turning it on and turning it off. The kill web is basically, if you can imagine, an Excel spreadsheet. One column has all of the targets that sensors have seen. And sensors are seeking targets desperately to find everyone they can find. And the next column has all of the weapon systems, friendly weapon systems in range that can fire and kill those systems. So the AI automatically links the shooters and the sensors. The shooters can actually defeat the target the sensor's seen. And if the sensor information is good, the shooter will get it right there because it's a precision guided weapon. And then the next column is simply, how do you want to execute? Simultaneously, individually, once every week. That's what that column is. So now you've got the ability, imagine in a first strike, if you had the kill web, to be able to shoot every weapon system efficiently and effectively against every target that is seen. So it's a matter of sensors and shooters acting in real time, the kill web. The next disruptor is visualizing in all domains. In other words, visualizing the battle space in all domains. This is a disruptor because we can't do it very well right now. Our military talks about a thing called a common operational picture, where from squad level all the way up to corps or army, everybody has an opportunity to see their piece of the battle space, and it all fits into the same puzzle in a way. It all goes into the same operational picture from one level to the next. Nobody has those. All armies are working on them. The U.S. Army is working diligently on it. The Israelis have done a pretty good job of it. The British Army's done a pretty good job. But the common operational picture is a huge fight. We've got to get a common operational picture so that commanders can understand the battle space, and command can be almost a service where no matter what headquarters you go to, you can get the operational picture you want. In the digital age, we can do this. We just haven't been able to synchronize our systems to the point where we can do it, and we haven't been able to make it self-evident so that human beings can operate it seamlessly. We will get there. One of the ways we might be able to get there is to go to artificial, to start using AR, artificial reality, something like the HoloLens, or something like the Apple Pro goggles. Those kind of systems that allow you to ditch the screens, get rid of the big talks, and have a commander's helmet where the commander, in fact, at all echelons, could in fact control the battle space from a command and control system that makes sense. Being able to see it holistically in 3 dimensions and 4 dimensions, actually being able to see the time and all that happen in real time. So the visualizing in all domains is important. And the next is decision dominance. The simplest way to explain decision dominance is that if you can put all these other disruptors together, you'll be hitting the enemy so many times that it'll be like they got hit 100 times and they haven't been able to raise their arms yet. Decision dominance means that your OODA loop is so fast that you're able to go through the observe, orient, decide, and act phase so much more faster than your enemy that it's as if he was standing still. Those are the 9 disruptors. Okay. Now, here's 7 observations that I want to talk about from recent wars. And these 7 observations come from all of the wars that have happened since 2020, and how that technology has been involved in that, and how human beings have been able to adapt TTP to it, tactics, techniques, and procedures. The first thing I want to say is that we're running out of time. I think the war is going to happen, major war is going to happen sooner rather than later. The next is the enemy first strike, which I've already talked a little bit about. We'll go into more detail. The distributed mission command, which is one way that we can start to address some of these issues so that we can still command in this very complex and yet very lethal and chaotic battle space. How we have to have bots before boots, the use of robots. How we have to address the counter UAS fight as a critical thing, and how we need to fight combined arms differently. And the Israelis are doing an interesting effort there. And then distributed logistics, which is a key element. First, running out of time. No kidding. There'll be no war. Keep calm. Carry on. Everybody wants things to remain as they are. We see things as human beings in a pretty linear way. But if you were looking at the world in 1938, and then you looked at it in 1942, and then you looked at it in 1946, the changes will be staggering. So things are going to happen faster than we think.
2 years ago, Ukraine burst open like a volcano, spewing lava into Europe. On 7th of October last year, West Asia went up in flames. For years, wars in many forms smoldered across the belt of Africa. This morning, artillery lit up Korea. War is raging across the world. There is a ring of fire that could quickly link up and engulf the world. From where I am sitting, all I can see is battlefields extending themselves as belligerents become ballistic. All I can hear is the sound of war. Is this the start of a new world war?
The world is on fire. The world is on fire. You can look all over the planet and you're going to find war. You just will. Africa has many, many wars happening right now. The Middle East is literally burning. Europe is once again fighting amongst themselves, the first war on the European continent since World War II. You have threats of war in South America, with Venezuela threatening to invade Guyana. You have war in Central America. Haiti is tearing itself apart. The world is on fire. We need to be ready for that fire. Of course, I advocate peace. You know me. I love peace. Peace through strength, the Reagan way. That's how it needs to be.
So
It's the sound of battle.
So the world's on fire. And the reason I show that is because if you're a soldier right now, if you're in the military and you're not getting ready, seriously ready, what are you waiting for? When I studied World War II, particularly Pearl Harbor, and you read the stories of the young men who were serving in the Navy and the Air Force and the Army just days before the attack, they didn't think a war was coming. But look at the indicators that they had all around them. I mean, the Germans were at the gates of Moscow. World War II had been going on basically for 2 years, although it wasn't called World War II yet. There was war in China. The Japanese were on the march. All these things were happening. So what does it take for us to wake up to understand it's coming? That's why I showed that first section. Now, enemy first strike. The enemy first strike, as I said, keeps me up at night. It should keep you up at night too. We need to start training, thinking, and planning for what would happen if the enemy hit us first. Look at that artillery. Those are thermobaric explosions.
During the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, CNN reported that Russian forces were moving thermobaric weapons into Ukraine. On February 28, 2022, Ukraine's ambassador to the United States accused Russia of deploying a thermobaric bomb. Not long after that, Russia has already confirmed the use of these weapons in Ukraine, as the Ministry of Defense in London has claimed this. This vacuum boom is regarded as one of the most devastating armaments in Russia's military arsenal and is capable of causing significant civilian casualties.
Most things can cause significant civilian casualties, but thermobarics are very, very destructive and should be outlawed. But they won't be. We're not children here. Now they've also reintroduced cluster munitions. The United States ceased the use of cluster munitions years and years ago. But clearly when it came time for there to be an actual war, the United States has allowed cluster munitions to be used by the Ukrainians. Also the long-range tactical missile strikes. War is no holes barred, which is one of the most frightening things because there's still a couple of things that haven't been used.
Now, thermobaric weapons are just one weapon. I showed that image because I wanted you to see the power of artillery. In Ukraine, artillery kills. Almost all the casualties are from artillery or from fragments from bombs and artillery and missiles. So being able to protect yourself against that is vital. As I mentioned earlier, almost every one of the United States military, the UK military, the French, all the Western nations, their militaries are living in peacetime barracks and they're on peacetime deployments. Our aircraft are stacked on airfields or not even in many cases under concrete bunkers. Our ships are at port unless they're sailing. If they're sailing, like in the Red Sea, they're combat ready. But if they're at port, they're not. So if you were going to do a first strike against the United States and its allies, and you could range almost anywhere in the world and see in real time almost anywhere in the world, just imagine the devastation you could wrought.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has ordered his military to prepare for war. He cited increased instability and uncertainty to China's national security as a reason to get war ready. Xi Jinping inspected the Joint Operations Command Center of the Central Military Commission and urged troops to enhance training and combat preparedness.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, they're not going to do that. They wouldn't wage war. It's not logical for them to attack. First of all, war is not logical. And secondly, if you're a soldier or a government leader, you can't think otherwise. You have to start preparing for the worst case. If you are responsible for soldiers and you don't prepare them for war, you're criminally negligent if a war happens. And since you can't be sure when a war is going to happen, you need to take these guys at their word when they say they're at war with us. Western forces haven't been up against this type of artillery since World War II. This artillery is better than World War II. The number of missiles that are being used and artillery shells used in Ukraine, amazing. 60, 70,000 artillery shells a month by Ukraine, 10 times that by Russia, 10,000 drones.
That is an immense amount of artillery. That is an immense amount of artillery. 60 to 70,000 a month by Ukraine, 10 times that by Russia. That is incredible. The West alone does not produce the amount that Russia uses in a year. We are in a serious logistical issue. We cannot produce at the same level as our adversaries. The Chinese can produce Navy ships 10 to 12 a year. We are years behind and can produce 1.5 destroyers a year. It's incredible. We are so far behind. We are so far behind. We really need to rethink peace through strength. We need to be the recreation of American artillery. Did you know in World War II, the United States artillery was the envy of everybody on the planet? In order to get artillery into a place, the Soviets would have to line them up wheel to wheel to wheel to wheel to wheel. As where the United States could have batteries miles apart from one another and coordinate their fire instantaneously, miles away. The United States was the king of artillery. But now we just drop it from a plane. We're learning the hard way that artillery is still king of the battlefield. And it's my hope that the United States very soon realizes that it is the king of the battlefield. We need a complete rethink of virtually our entire military industrial complex.
A month. Think of the precision firepower that's being unleashed. If it's seen, it can be hit. If it's hit, it is killed. So therefore, we have to be able to mask. We need to understand what masking is. Now, let me go back one. Masking is something you need to write this down or take a screenshot of it. Masking is something you need to understand. It is the full spectrum, multi-domain effort to deceive enemy sensors and disrupt enemy targeting. This is not a military definition in our dictionaries yet. It is not in our doctrine yet, but it needs to be. It is about a tactical to strategic view of how you can survive in a transparent, lethal battle space. You have to take action. You got to deceive the enemy sensors and disrupt their targeting. Deceive their sensors and disrupt their targeting. It's more than just deception. Deception is wonderful and usually considered at the strategic level. Of course, deception can go all the way down to the tactical level, but when lieutenants talk deception, what do they talk about? They talk about Normandy or something. So masking is something that we need to get into their brain housing group to get them to understand that they have to think every day about how to deceive enemy sensors and disrupt the enemy's targeting system. Deceive the sensors and disrupt the targeting, and it has to be a full spectrum, multi-domain effort.
Our adversaries constantly think of ways to deceive. Not just what you see in the news. The Russians have a name for it. It's called maskirovka. It's a strategic deception or a tactical deception, and they practice it as an art of their warfare. It's something we have to adopt. We have to adapt to it and adopt it ourselves. He's absolutely correct. Maskirovka needs to become something in our military that we practice routinely.
Now, there are 5 areas that we have to be able to mask in, and this changes everything in warfare. There are no sanctuaries in the battle space. There's no place that can't be hit. So imagine what this means for logistics systems and logistics setups. Now, this is a picture right here that you're seeing in red and green and amber.
Just real quick. His statement that if you can be seen, you can be hit. We have learned this in the Ukraine war. There are numerous videos hundreds of kilometers away from the front of trains unloading tanks, armored personnel carriers, supply that some drone found, and the next thing you know, there's an Iskander landing right on their lap. This has been proven to be absolutely true, 100% true.
Of a U.S. unit at the National Training Center. And the red shows the greatest area of electronic transmission. This is in the electromagnetic spectrum. The yellow's next, and then the green. So if you're the red commander and you have this picture and you're ready to do a first strike, you can launch every missile, every artillery shell in range, every drone in range at the red area and kill everything there. And you're going to wipe out the command and control of this unit. And then, of course, you can take out the green at your leisure. Now, we have to be able to mask in 5 areas: the optical, the thermal, the electronic, the acoustic, and the quantum. Yeah, the quantum. First, the optical. The optical, that's camouflage. and many things that you can do to hide in the optical spectrum. We've been doing this for years, and we need to do it better. One of our challenges is that we're lazy, our discipline is poor, and we don't make our soldiers camouflage the way they should. Camouflaging themselves, camouflaging their equipment, camouflaging our positions. We have to be able to do that. The next is thermal. We need to understand and master thermal camouflage. Now, how do you do that? Well, number one, you have to know what you look like. So we need to get our thermal goggles out, and we need to see what our positions look like through our own thermal systems. And if the enemy has comparable systems, then we need to figure out ways to minimize the heat difference between us and the terrain. And if we can do that, if we can figure out how to blend in to the heat background, we can become harder to see in the thermal area. It's not easy, but it's a lot harder if you don't even try. The next is electronic. This is the electronic image of what an EMS picture of a unit looks like at a training center. It tells you where everybody is who uses any kind of electronic device. And oh, by the way, if we let our soldiers use cell phones, they will die. If we let our soldiers bring cell phones to the field, or sailors, airmen, and Marines to the field, those cell phones will be found, and they will give our position away, and we can be destroyed. Now, we're talking a lot about how we're going to use apps from Android phones in order to do things within the command and control sphere. All of that can be regulated, but if they're individual personalized cell phones, mobile phones out there in the battle space, all that does is give away your position, because every mobile phone says, here I am, where are you? Here I am, where are you? Constantly. Now, the Russians, they had a problem with this on New Year's Eve.
This is an incredible story, and it shows the complete need for the discipline when it comes to cell phones and any other kind of electronic device that links to a network. This is incredible. This is absolutely incredible. Listen closely, because we don't want this happening to any of our guys.
On New Year's Eve last year, they had over 500 mobilniks who had just come in to Crimea, and they were at a place called Avitka, and they were sitting in there. They were sitting in this large building. The Ukrainians found them and hit them and killed most of them. One of the largest death tolls of Russian soldiers so far in the war in one day, all because the Russians didn't have the discipline to take away their mobile phones. And when the whole thing was over, the Russian leaders said, well, it was the soldiers' fault. Really, the soldiers' fault, because they told them not to use the phones. Well, leaders take action to make sure that those kind of things happen, that those phones are not used. We have a discipline problem in our military as well with this. The next is acoustic. Acoustic is the ability to hear sounds, and we have drones and other systems out there right now that can hear sound from long range, and then they hear the sound of the guns, for instance, the fire of a cannon, and they are able to triangulate on that and find a location. So with acoustic sensors, which are very cheap and passive, you can find out the location. And then lastly, quantum. Quantum is spooky, high-tech, and something you don't have to worry as much about right now, but in a few years, it's going to become a bigger thing. Right now, the Chinese are developing quantum sensors to find our stealth aircraft. We are also developing stealth quantum sensors to see things that we want to see. So this is becoming more and more an issue. It's right now mostly involved in radar for aircraft, but someday it'll also be involved with ships. It'll also be involved on the ground. So those are the 5 areas that we have to be able to mask in, and you need to think about each one of those. Next, distributed mission command. This is how we used to do headquarters. This is an actual CP, U.S. Army CP, that was used for command post, that was used for a exercise. They didn't camouflage it because, well, it's only an exercise. They didn't dig in any of the generators because, well, it's only an exercise. Think about it. You train as you fight. If you do this, you set the standard. Soldiers think this is the way things should be. This is criminal. We can never do this. By the way, tents do not protect you. The Armenians found that out in the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War. Their command posts were wiped out in the first week. All the tents that they had set up were destroyed. They lost most of their brain power in those tents. Just go ahead and assemble all your best leaders under a tent and watch the enemy kill it. This is a signature that you cannot get away from. All of those generators are loud. All of those generators are hot. All of those tents are hot. Even if you put nets over them, it wouldn't matter. They're out in the middle of nowhere. They're out in the middle of the open. Don't put a command post ever in the open. So we have to think differently about how we do our CPs. In Ukraine, command post after command post have been destroyed. So I'm putting together an article, which I'll pass out in the next month or so, called 21 Command Post Maxims, which deals with points that everybody who's involved in a command post should understand and should heed. Because if you don't, the enemy's going to kill us. We have to think differently. We need to have a distributed mission command mesh CP setup. What this means is we have 2 or 3 armored vehicles working together as a team, and that team becomes Command Group A, another 2 become Command Group B, another 2 become Command Group C. Now you could have 3, but you can't have more than 4. 4 is the max. Why? 4 of anything in the battle space looks like a platoon. 6, 10, 15, 20, that looks like a target. The enemy's going to be looking for large configurations, large collections of vehicles. If you have a core headquarters with 120 vehicles, it won't last a day. In Ukraine right now, these were obliterated. The Russians no longer do this kind of stuff. The Ukrainians no longer put their command posts together like we used to. We have to change how we think. We're moving slowly in that direction, but we're not moving fast enough, and we're not thinking about this as we should. Now, distributed mission command and a mesh CP has a couple of tenets to it. The CP's purpose is to enable mission command, period. Mission command is what a commander does in order to execute the battle and command. Now, we need to mask to survive. We need to get rid of all the big screens and the big tents. We need to get rid of the static command center. No more expando vans either. All we need is just being out there in the space in an armored vehicle of some kind. Now, some of you say, wait a minute, what about light infantry? You have a choice. You either get into some kind of armored vehicle that can move, or you better dig in. And it's pretty hard to attack from a bunker. So if you're in the attack, light infantry has huge problems. They have to think this through. And we're going to be operating less and less with command posts that are sitting out there with tents and other systems, because there isn't enough air defense to protect them. And once the enemy kills them, all the brain power that is destroyed there will be very difficult to reconstitute.
And as we've learned lately, NATO doesn't have the air defense to do very much. We just had that admiral come out when he was advising civilian contractors and manufacturers to think on a war footing that there's not enough air defense to defend, I believe it was 5 or 10% of NATO targets, and that air defense would be used up within weeks. NATO's air defense has incredibly lacked over the last 30 years, 40 years, because the NATO air forces have been completely dominant. There's been an air dominance, not air superiority, air dominance that has clouded the vision of ground commanders that they will not need air defense. It's becoming quite clear that they need air defense, and they need it badly.
So our command posts need to go micro. They need to go as small as possible. Ditch the big screens and be dispersed. They need to go mobile and armor up. No matter what kind of unit you're in, you need to find some kind of armored vehicle. Get something, an MRAP. Get something with wheels if you have to. Get something with tracks, which is better. But we need to armor up. We should have armored command vehicles. We don't. But we will get some eventually because we'll have to. We need to drone up. Every one of the command posts needs to have drones. Drones need to be integral to the command post. So the command post doesn't move down the road unless 2 or 3 or 6 or 10 drones are already moving forward. That has to happen. Right now, it's not happening. Before the command post moves into an area to set up, drones should have already done a reconnaissance of that area before the humans ever arrived. We need to have the drones integrated all the way through our force. And small UAS are critical for this. And we need a small UAS flying above us to see how we look from the top. The next is we need to mask resupply. Because if you're being resupplied and trucks are coming into an area and you've got everything camouflaged and really well masked, but the trucks drive up there and drop off, hot food and water and everything, the drones will see that. And I've watched video after video, particularly during the Second Nagorno-Karabakh war, where Armenians would be in trucks, move to an area. Usually that area was a large supply depot area where there were other trucks, and that's when the drones would come in and kill them all. So they'll follow the truck to the location and then kill what's at the location. We need to mask that resupply. And then lastly, we need to be prepared to reconstitute the command post. As much as we don't want our command post destroyed, Russian and Ukrainian command posts have been destroyed over and over and over again. How are you going to reconstitute those command posts? Who's going to fit in those jobs for those majors that took 15 years to train and colonels that took 20 years to train that are now dead? Who's going to take their place? We got to figure out how to reconstitute the CP. That's why we have to do these things about going micro, going mobile, and going armored. Bots before boots. We need to put robots before everything.
In future warfare, an experienced, battle-weary soldier with finely honed instincts will incorporate AI into combat missions, endowing AI with the same level of trust that they share with their fellow soldiers.
You develop a trust in AI through practice, and people are already getting that practice through their use of smartphones, engaging with platforms like Siri and Alexa. People are already very familiar with that and very used to it.
Artificial intelligence, already part of our modern life, has exploitable capabilities that militaries are leveraging in the combat zone.
It can do things over and over. It's very accurate. It never gets bored. It doesn't need to sleep.
AI is most likely to be developed and incorporated in what is often referred to as the dirty and dangerous tasks in the military. On the battlefield, for example, removing wounded personnel.
So those kind of functions that are dumb, or dirty, or dangerous are very, very well suited to artificial intelligence.
Why take 2, 3, 4 fit and capable soldiers to carry one of the colleagues off the battlefield if that could be delegated to a robot of some kind that could pick up and carry that person away? So that leaves you with your other functioning soldiers to continue whatever attack or defense is going on.
AI, in many ways, allows certain skills that used to be the sole domain of humans to be outsourced or taken over by robots.
What we've seen in Ukraine is the use of drones for supply missions, attack missions, and we've also seen them now used in medevac. There's been a number of videos of large drones being used by Russians to evacuate Russian soldiers from the front line back to medical facilities. This will become an everyday thing. This will become an everyday thing. Again, this is how war has changed. That drones will be used to pick up wounded soldiers, bring them back a number of kilometers back to medical facilities that can better handle them and are not under direct fire. We've also seen drones dropping supplies on trapped Russian soldiers and Ukrainian soldiers, both of them, both sides. We've also seen an interesting tactic where small groups of Russian soldiers, saboteurs, and or infiltrators will move forward ahead, get it behind enemy lines, and start doing their work, recon, sabotage, all that stuff. And their supply is done by drone. Drones fly in, drop supplies to them, they continue to operate. The future of war has changed. It's changed a lot. We need to drone up is such an understatement. It's such an understatement.
So imagine, how will you conduct medical evacuation of soldiers, wounded soldiers, when the helicopters can't get anywhere near the front lines because they'll be shot down? We've got to rethink a lot. Now, robots can do a lot of things. They can help us. This is an Israeli Firefly. This Spike Firefly is changing how the Israelis are doing operations in Gaza. The Firefly is first, bots before boots. The Israelis get it. They're trying to minimize casualties with the use of these robots. And this is a pretty sophisticated system. There's a lot of other systems out there that are available for us to use. We do not have in the U.S. Army this kind of system integrated to the company and platoon level.
Why? Why don't we have that integrated in the company and the platoon level? It should be integrated into the squad level. There should be FPV drones ubiquitous. They should be one of the primary weapon systems used by soldiers on the ground, the FPV drone. The Spike is a wonderful system, and as you're going to see here, it clearly works. It's highly effective. It's also highly expensive. One of the things we've learned in the Ukraine is that a $500 FPV racing drone with an RPG rocket attached to it is one of the most effective weapons on the battlefield. This is less than probably $2,000. I don't know how much an RPG warhead is. I've never looked it up. But it's dirt cheap. And that's something that we also need to take into account, is that we are going broke, and we need to make sure that we don't go broke. So we don't need to be buying billion-dollar weapon systems when something that is $2,000 can take care of the same thing.
Negative. We are taking up machine guns because they're by.
So this is available. We're working it. You see there, U.S. Army soldiers are testing it. But there's a huge flash to bang time between being able to get the system and get it into the hands of troops and get them trained. So we've got a long road to go. And if we go to war tomorrow, we're not going to have it. We don't have it in the numbers we need it in. We need lots of them. As I said, the Ukrainians are losing 10,000 drones a month.
Losing 10,000 drones a month. That's losing. That is not including the ones that are effective, the ones that are hitting, the ones that are taking down targets. Those are the ones that are hitting telephone poles, hitting trees, getting tied up in wires. It's an expensive proposition. And like he's about to say, we don't have the people trained to do it. And yes, it takes a lot to train an FPV drone pilot. I can tell you from personal experience, one of the kids I used to have loves FPV racing drones. And what it takes to learn how to fly them with proficiency, as he's about to state, it takes a lot of training.
10,000 drones a month. That's both kamikaze-like drones and also drones that are ISR or others that are shot down or ruined or hit trees or whatever. 10,000. So think of the numbers that you need. And more importantly, how many operators? We need drone operators badly. The U.S. Army has a dearth of drone operators, small UAS operators, not as many as we need. Some people say, well, these systems are self-evident. They're intuitive. They're so easy to use. You don't need much training. I assure you, to be able to drop the grenades down a hatch, you need training. Also, flying these things in first-person view in the dark as it weaves in and out of trees, you will crash more systems than you can imagine if your pilots aren't trained. Like anything, training is important. We should be having drone racing teams in every one of our units. We should give them trophies for winning. We should make it a sport. We should figure out how to get this going, because this is changing warfare. And I'm the strong believer that the U.S. Army needs to have a drone corps.
I completely agree. The United States Army needs to have a drone corps. There need to be incentives, like he said. There need to be units dedicated to it. Cash rewards, promotion rewards. You find a way. This needs to be absolutely at the forefront of the United States military doctrinal evolution.
Because only with the drone corps are we going to be able to get this to go fast enough. We really need to think that through. The counter-UAS fight.
The theatre of modern warfare is constantly evolving, with today's infantrymen facing a whole host of new threats that never existed previously. Drones, for instance, have revolutionized the ways in which states carry out attacks, often offering inexpensive and highly effective solutions to undertake strikes without the need to risk personnel. But in the same way that nation-states can use drones, adversaries may also benefit. Weaponized drones pose an increasingly clear and present threat to soldiers stationed at sensitive or vulnerable locations. Identifying and taking out a fast-moving unmanned aerial vehicle can prove a futile challenge, even for the greatest of sharpshooters. In order to address this threat, weapons designers across the world have developed a whole slew of solutions, ranging from the use of trained eagles to locate and latch onto drones in mid-air to radio jamming technology. How does the technology work? Yet, the Smash 2000 Plus system, developed by Israeli outfit Smart Shooter, is one counter-drone solution that the Indian Navy has identified as having the greatest promise. Simply, the Smash 2000 Plus scope enables a soldier using an assault rifle to lock onto moving targets within his or her field of view and shoot him down with the first round. In doing so, it has effectively integrated tank fire control technology onto the common assault rifle. A rifleman can use the scope to first track the target before holding down the trigger of the assault rifle. However, the scope will only allow the weapon to fire at the precise moment that it determines that a shot will surely strike the target. Using sophisticated algorithms, the technology calculates the movement of a target and predicts where it is likely to be. Advanced image processing. The Israeli manufacturer advertises the technology as putting a precision anti-drone capability at the fingertips of its users, even going so far as to claim that it can strike tiny drones, moving at high speeds up to a range of 120 meters, with the first shot. Key to the success of the technology has also been the weight factor. The technology has also been in use by the Israeli Defense Forces for several months, specifically those located at the Gaza border, where the threat of drones and incendiary balloons is said to be high.
So, the Smash system that you just saw there, here's the concept. We cannot get enough counter-UAS systems into the hands of the troops in time. The ability to knock them out with jamming guns or jamming rifles is diminishing every day, because systems are now having, drone systems are now having new GPS systems that are hard to jam, and new navigation systems that don't rely on GPS and other things. And you don't even need a signal back to the operator in some cases.
Autonomous weapon systems. Also, what has really taken over a lot of these FPV drone strikes in the Ukraine is wire-guided. A lot of these FPV drones have had fiber optic or cable attached to them, so they can't be jammed or interfered with. The only thing they have to deal with are the actual physical obstacles. But they can't be jammed or interfered with, and their precision strike record is incredible, and something that it's going to be tough for that one to be countered, other than, well, there's one thing that might work.
So in those cases, we're not going to be able to knock the drone down with a jamming rifle, and that's very close range. One of the most effective ways to change an army is to increase the effectiveness of the ammunition or increase the accuracy of the ammunition. What the Smash does is it creates a situation where every rifleman can actually shoot down a drone. Now, the system costs about $20,000, so we're not going to have it on every rifle. But if you shoot a rifle with regular ACOG sights or even iron sights or anything at these drones, you're never going to hit it. I've seen video after video after video of mass formations of soldiers trying to knock down these drones. Volume of fire matters, but they never hit it. You've got to.
This is where a shotgun. That's an immense amount of money for a system that is just in its infancy. How about a shotgun? A Mossberg 500, a Remington 870. Something that you can pump out a whole bunch of little pellets out there quick. It's cheap, readily available. Everyone can use it. Has proven the ability to knock things out of the sky prior. You don't have to destroy the whole thing. You just got to knock parts of it off so it veers off. Something as simple as a shotgun. Sometimes, you try to reinvent the wheel when the wheel works just fine.
to have pinpoint accuracy, and that's why you need this computerized fire control system. And even then, it's only going to work for very close in. So we need better counter UAS. One of the things that we did in World War II, we had precision weapons attacking our ships in World War II in the Pacific. Those precision weapons were called kamikazes. They were piloted by human beings. We couldn't believe it when it first happened that they would actually do that, but they did. And they were very effective in disrupting our ships. So we had to come up with some new tactics quick because we couldn't get any new equipment. So one of the things the Navy did, the U.S. Navy did, was create what they call the big blue blanket. And what that was, since the aircraft were painted blue back then in the Navy, the bottom was light blue and the top was sea blue. What they did was they started putting out a combat air patrol from morning till night, and then even some went out at night, although there were fewer night operational capable aircraft then. And they would fly these as far out as they could in the patterns that they knew the kamikazes would come from, because there were so many Japanese islands in that direction. And they would have as many aircraft up constantly ready to shoot these down, and a series of picket ships that were basically destroyers that went farther out from the main force to be able to see these aircraft as they were coming in. And then they would try to shoot them down at distance. Now, they weren't always successful. And in Okinawa, we lost a lot of sailors to Japanese kamikazes. But this technique diminished the kamikaze threat by a dramatic amount. And it was important to do this. So imagine today if we had the same thing. We used our attack helicopters, but instead of trying to shoot them down with cannon and by eyeball or anything, we had instead 2.75-inch rockets with laser-guided projectiles that, in fact, already are in the system right now that could be laser designated onto these drones as we see them, and then fire and explode and have proximity charges. There's lots of other things we could do. We need to think this through. I even suggest that we start looking at propeller-driven aircraft with a lot of hard points that could put these rockets on them so that you'd be flying around. Imagine if Ukraine had this now, and they were able to shoot down the Shahed 136s and all that with aircraft flying in the sky shooting rockets at them. This would be a much more effective way than using a Patriot missile or a Stinger, which costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we need to think this through. The counter UAS fight is something that we're not ready for yet, even though we've.
Again, I come back to the boot on the ground. Yes, I agree that airplanes with many hard points carry multiple rockets that are laser designated for these larger drones are important. But when it comes down to the boot on the ground, the poor guy you saw at the beginning of this video where the drone flew right into his APC and you just sitting there shooting at it, how about a shotgun? How about every one of them in that APC have a shotgun? A couple $100, a few boxes of ammo. I think they'd be a little more successful, and at least for American troops, can we at least do that? Something, give at least a morale advantage, a psychological thought that maybe they have a chance.
You've had years to prepare for it. No, by the way, that picture here is a Merkava tank with a cope cage on the tank. The top of that is slat armor. And some people say, well, that's useless. Really? The Israelis aren't that stupid. Now, the Russians had it on their tanks, and everybody kind of laughed at the Russians. There was a reason the Russians put them on there, the same reason the Israelis put them on there. These will help you protect the tank from small UAS. If a grenade goes off on top of that slat roof armor and you are able to get inside your armor, close the hatch, or at least duck down, you have a better chance of survival. And that grenade is not going to go in the turret, which is what the big problem is. You get a grenade in the turret and it can blow the tank up because of fire inside.
That's all it takes. And he flew in through the cope cage. Imagine what it'd be like when you don't. There's hundreds of videos online. If you want to find out what it's like when they don't have the cope cage, it's a lot more difficult. There he had to fly through it.
So this is a very important new piece of equipment that's going to be on all tanks someday, and someday we'll see it on the M1. But right now, we just still haven't got the idea. We need to fight combined arms differently. What's going on in Gaza right now gives us a glimpse to the future. The tanks are being used, and the Namer APCs, as nodes to collect information and to direct drones and airstrikes. And the infantry operate around them. That doesn't mean they can't be taken down. That doesn't mean you can't have casualties. Close combat is still deadly. But the Israelis are using their armor and infantry in combined arms in a city better than I've ever seen anyone do it in history. There's a lot to learn from them. So, warfare's changing. Combined arms maneuver wins, but we need to add drones. We need drones in all our formations. Some of you may be tankers out there. I was a tank officer for 30 years. Okay, so we used to have a thing called Table 8. We would go down and we would qualify our tank. Today, we still do the same thing that I was doing back in 1976. But guess what? Today, we should have drones with us. Every tank should be talking to a drone, should send a drone forward, and then move out and shoot at a target the drone sees. We need to start doing this in all our training. Now, the tank is not dead, but the way the tanks are being destroyed certainly gives you some pause, reasons to pause. Now, what we've got to do is change our tactics. What you see in Ukraine when you see hundreds of tanks being destroyed by the Ukrainians or the Russians killing other armored vehicles from the Ukrainians is mostly trapping the enemy and bad tactics. What we've got to do is figure out better tactics, greater dispersion. The tank is not dead, but the way we fight it is. We've got to change our tactics. Our drone tactics must also change. We've got to get drones down to the smallest level, and we've got to integrate all our operations with them. They give us a window into the world and an ability to fight immediately, sense, and strike that nothing else does. We need to win the counter-UAS fight. The counter-UAS fight requires a commander in charge of forces to defeat the enemy's UAS. We don't have that anywhere. We think we're going to fight the counter-UAS fight just kind of like bird shooting or something, or I don't know. You know, the enemy comes, we'll defend it. We'll defend against them. We need to destroy the enemy before they get to our forces. As we see them coming in, it's a maneuver fight just like any other fight, but it needs a commander with forces to fight it. The long-range precision fires are now setting the conditions. So fire sets the conditions for maneuver. Once the conditions are set, then you can maneuver. Our challenge was in the counteroffensive this last summer with Ukraine is that the fires were never able to set the conditions, and we tried to maneuver anyway. And this was the old way. We taught them how to fight in the old way, and the Ukrainians died in the old way. We need to practice in scenarios that have us fighting against Russians and Taiwanese and Iranians and North Koreans. We need to get off the political correctness, learn our enemies, and start training. And we also need to develop what I'm calling an MDO breakthrough zone, which gets back a little bit into what I was saying with the drone swarm, the super swarm, and also the ability to set the conditions to break through, deep defensive belts. We can do this. We got to think it through. Explosive breach is one of the better ways. There's a lot of things to think through on this, but we need to think through what a multi-domain operations breakthrough zone would look like.
One of the things that we've seen in the Ukraine is that a breakthrough is really, really difficult to do in a multi-dimensional threat battlefield. What has become obvious is that it's very, very difficult to go past the range of your FPV drones. If you go past the range of your FPV drones, you yourself get FPV droned. This has been obvious on a number of battlefields that I've seen, and anyone can go look this stuff up. If you go 6 to 10 kilometers past your front line, you then become the target. That's obviously not past the range of long-range artillery. Artillery can still be there to back you up, but you just get swarmed by drones. Not in the swarms he's talking about, but I've seen videos of tanks getting hit 10, 12 times before they explode. The fact that you can hit them 10 or 12 times is the point. That you just get hammered by drones. That at this moment, 6 to 10 kilometers is pretty much the maximum any large force can break through without being devastated by drones.
What happened in Ukraine this last summer is not one. And our tanks in the future will operate totally differently. I see a time we'll have one human tank with 4, 5, 6 robotic tanks and a swarm of UAS around them that are constantly replenished when those are going. And the tank commander will simply order the robots by voice to go online, follow me, shoot where I shoot, just like you would the regular platoon. So we need to have a new concept with armor. The whole concept of the triangle of firepower, protection, and mobility needs to now be rethought with the 9 disruptors. And how are you going to do that? The tanks of the future that we make should be computers with armor built around them to be able to control all of the different multi-domain operation forces that a tank could give you, because it has a power source, it has mobility, and it has protection. It's still important on our battle space. Lastly, distributed logistics. Our logistics needs to change.
Today, container ships transport more than 90% of all goods in the world and more than $4 trillion worth of goods annually.
But none of that's going through the Red Sea right now. We can't do this anymore. We can't set up big logistics bases. We have ports like that with all the containers. We have this. These are targets waiting to be destroyed. And once they destroy these targets, what are we going to do? Once our fuel, ammo, medical supplies, everything is up in fire, what are we going to do? We in the past haven't had the enemy strike our logistics points. In any of the wars in the last 30 years, we haven't had that happen to us. It's going to happen in the next war, and we need to start changing our logistics system to do it and training our logistics force to be prepared for it. So how can we conduct logistics and sustain in the modern battle space? Many of the things I've already talked about. We have got to figure out, since these are high priority targets, we've got to figure out how to change our log, tactics, techniques, and procedures. We need to disperse. We need to be mobile and protected. We need better training. We need more drones doing some of this stuff. And we need to figure out how we're going to evacuate casualties and how we'll resupply in the defense and how we'll resupply in the offense.
That right there might be one of the most important. How are we going to supply our forces, which are typically going to be halfway across the world? We're no longer building Liberty ships to send all of our supplies across the ocean. That's just not happening. We don't have the time. The time of warfare is so much shorter than it was in World War II. From the time of interpretation to contact to resolve, it's moments. We don't have the time to allow stuff to go 3 weeks to a month on a Liberty ship across the ocean. We need to supply these troops quickly, efficiently, and it's going to be halfway across the world, perhaps more. How are we going to do that? We're going to need fleets of aircraft, drone aircraft more than likely, of fleets of drone supply aircraft, fleets of them. We need to rethink the way we fight. We need to rethink the way we fight war. We need to rethink the way we supply for that war.
Drones can give us some great capabilities. This is a cardboard drone made by Australia. You can put stuff in it, it flies. We're going to be delivering stuff in the States by drone. We already do. We're going to deliver more and more in the future. There's no reason we can't start doing this with our military forces, and we need to get on it. Lastly, we need to dig in to survive. I know I said go mobile and go armor, but if you don't have any armor and you can't go mobile and you're on the defense, you better learn how to dig in. And you better learn how to dig in your CPs.
There are many simple things in the world. Shovels. They're all different. Guarding shovel. Unloading shovel. Children's shovel. But there's also a different shovel. We use it when we come to the position. In a short time, it helps us dig a trench, which saves us from bullets. If a tank will pass over the trench, there's a high probability that it will not cause any harm to the soldier. We dig in the ground deeper and then connect the trenches with our friends to the left. In just a few hours, trenches are all connected. If we do not have an axe, we can use a shovel to cut a loaf of bread. The soldier uses the shovel as a paddle, crossing the wide river under enemy fire. If we run out of ammunition, we'll use the shovel again. Get the order to stop. We'll take a shovel again and build around us an impregnable fortress. This fortress is defended by the Army of Ukraine, our army.
One of the questions I ask soldiers when I give these presentations, and by the way, you guys are my 339th presentation now since 2021. So I've given almost 1 or 2 a week. Sometimes I do more. But I ask the question, when's the last time you dug a foxhole? Very few hands raised. Then I ask, how many have built a fighting position lately? Nobody raised their hands. How many of you have ever dug a trench? Nobody. Now, we prefer to be on the offense. We prefer never to dig in. I got it. But artillery kills. So we got to think through these things. Now, I've given you a whirlwind tour of what modern warfare is like. There's more questions and more of the things that I could talk about. I've already taken up almost an hour and 15 minutes of your precious time, and I appreciate your focus and your attention. Now I would stay on as long as you wish to answer whatever questions you might throw at me. Thank you.
And thank you, Colonel. Yeah, digging in is probably the most important thing, as the United States Army has to basically relearn trench warfare. A lot of its kit is going to have to change and evolve into a more modern kit to represent digging deep into the ground. Maybe everybody needs a blanket that has woven in metal threads to block the entrance to a foxhole from a FPV drone. Maybe your poncho needs to be basically a space blanket where you're thermally invisible to the eyes of a drone. We have to rethink everything, down to the kit, to the boot, to the shoe, to the pants, to the blouse, to the hat, to the poncho, to the shovel. War has changed. This has been a great example of it. And if you're still with me, I really appreciate you staying along for the ride. I think this is an important subject, one that is not getting any attention whatsoever, because it is very much into the weeds. It's very much into the weeds. But I think it's very important. It's important that the U.S. military is on the cutting edge to save our soldiers' lives so that they don't ever have to actually do it. Peace. But peace through strength. Peace through strength and preparedness. That's the only way. And for staying through this, I hope you like and subscribe. And I thank you.